Hello and welcome to this latest tutorial. This time we're going to talk about interiors, architectural interiors. Just like the last time where we took a realistic spin on things, we're going to stay that way. We're not going to make anything outrageously crazy, alien or whatever. We're going to be predominantly staying within the human realm and something that can actually be built. So this tutorial about architectural interiors in Blender is going to be about the initial stages of research, collecting reference, organizing them. I'm going to share a little bit about what I'm looking for when collecting the reference and with what I decide to go forward. Then we're going to talk about the application of these references in 3D in Blender, how to build out our spaces, how to really understand scale and space and lighting, materials, function, and all these things that are key to interiors. And then, of course, we're going into final touches. I'm not going to spend too much time like painting over or doing anything fancy in Photoshop. We're going to pretty much leave the 3D renders as they are with a minor touch of color grading, because we want to really focus on the design aspect, and we can do most of that in 3D. So for this first part, which I mean you can call research, reference, or whatever, analysis, it's really about again collecting the reference that for the space that you envision. I'm focusing here on like a smaller scale space, and we're gonna kind of take apart a little bit the images here and organize them to have a better idea of what we want to do. So we're gonna jump right into it, and I have a variety of references here for various spaces here, but of course you can kind of see that they already have quite a common theme, something very dimly lit, maybe lots of concrete, interesting patterns on the floor, moody. I want to really get the point across about making this feel cinematic, making this feel interesting, and there's a couple of things to it, but one thing after the other. So once you've brought all your stuff into a program like PureRef, so I've introduced that before, you can download it on the internet. It's for free. It works on all platforms, and you can basically drag and drop your images into here, and you can have it organized, and then you can drag them around. And the canvas, it's an infinite canvas, and then you can organize your images according to that. So, okay, maybe we want to organize these maybe according to lighting and structures or mood. So I have a couple of images here that are mostly dealing with kind of light and where and how it comes in. Maybe this one also here. Some images that are more about the mood more than anything, because these are exterior spaces, but I kind of like the mood they give. There's images where I'm quite interested about the structure of it. So if you put these all in separate corners, and I don't worry about the layout right now. It's quite messy. I just want to have all these ideas here in various areas here. So maybe this is also more mood image than anything. This could be about structure. This is also interesting. So I like all these ripped elements that have these little details here. If you zoom into here, you can see it has all these interesting patterns, and maybe that can be one part of it. I can kind of balance these kind of finer details out with maybe some of the more like the more straightforward concrete walls, I mean, I'm just going here with what I find interesting, and I mean, the whole concrete thing is always looks great to me. It doesn't have to be about brutalism or anything. It can be a bit more of a modern approach. Here's also something maybe about lighting, reflections that kind of fit into the overall mood of the image I'm trying to create. This is maybe a bit too crazy. Not sure how I can use that. I don't have to use everything. I can delete some of these. Like this one doesn't really match here. Maybe this can be another point about lighting. So one thing I'm quite clear about is that I think there needs to be some kind of like skylight. I wanna create a space full of contrasts. So let's say we have something like a solid material, like concrete, but I want to maybe introduce a contrast in terms of having the concrete as a very solid, sturdy material, but maybe have the space be very round and open and feeling quite light. Maybe I can offset it with things like wood, or maybe I can use glass, or I can use certain type of furniture that has a soft material. Maybe I can use soft lighting and some foliage to loosen up the space, or I can use like warm lighting inside and cool lighting outside. All these things kind of to play with contrasts. So here we have some of the more interesting shapes here. So I mean, this is like a dual function, because it deals with concrete, but it also gives us an idea of the kind of lighting that can come in from the ceiling. Some other ideas. So yeah, this will be what probably I'm going to look at. This will be the kind of mood, the kind of color grade I'm looking for, the kind of lighting that, again, this is like a dual function. It has the lighting and the color I want. So it's probably going to be something close to this. Looking at the lighting as something I have to take extra care of. So if we have the light come in through the ceiling, that'll be great. But if it's just about like light coming in, I think the shadow and everything is not going to be that interesting. So I want to look at different ways of how I can make a more interesting kind of lighting scenario. So we have, for example, something like this here, which gives us these patterns on the ground, which is not bad. I like this idea, this like bunker type feeling. Maybe if we can, and this is pretty interesting how it has this structure on the ceiling and then the light filters through. I want to create these kind of opportunities for the light to highlight certain areas, whether it is like here you can see like how it highlights and highlights the person here and gives us an opportunity to direct the focus of our composition, right? So we don't have just random things standing around, but we actually have the highlight on a certain person and can play with contrast and silhouettes for maybe other people in the background. We can see here like there's I mean this image is maybe not the best one, but the light kind of hits a certain person at a certain angle, and we kind of focus on that, and the rest of the people are just kind of only silhouettes, but of course we still know, we can recognize them as humans. So, and another thing that we want to do is talking about cinematic approach. So because anything that, like you guys know, anything I do has to do with design, has to do with a cinematic concept design approach, and this is not going to be any different. So what makes something cinematic, I guess, comes down to the focus and the lighting. Having nice dramatic lighting that pushes storytelling, that pushes the focus on a particular person or a particular item. But also, if we talk about architecture and and making something cinematic, we can kind of push it a little bit, since we have the freedom here to design something different, something new. As we deal with usually quite a wide aspect ratio in cinema, if we talk about cinema scope 2:3:9 to 1, it's always going to be easier if we kind of make our architecture a bit wider. Like good example would be this here, that it's actually quite wide. It's quite it uses the frame. If you kind of cut in here with a cinema scope frame, then something that's wide, that is wider than it is high, is always going to work better, I think. Like whereas if we have something like this, it will be quite narrow and high. In order to get this image, this building into a cinema scope frame, you can imagine if we draw the frame here, there's going to be a lot of space that we have to fill otherwise with the surroundings, with whatever. So that's a bit tricky. I mean, it's also an exterior, but it doesn't matter. This one could also probably work quite well as a widescreen kind of framed interior. So that's maybe something we need to keep in mind. If you think of examples, I mean, of course, you can do it either way. But if I think about concrete examples from movies, two things come to mind, and they have different kind of effects, right? So a recent example was the movie Parasite, where there was a house, a fancy villa from a rich family, and they had a big window that was in the living room facing the garden, and the director purposely made that glass in an aspect ratio of 2:3:5 to 1, like CinemaScope. And that's an interesting example of where the aspect ratio of the movie itself becomes a stylistic element inside the movie. Or if we talk about a movie like In the Mood for Love, where it's about showing the tight living conditions of staying in small apartments in 1960s Hong Kong, where it becomes a stylistic device where how narrow it is and how claustrophobic it can be reflects on the actors' feeling of imprisonment and confinement. So it can be a stylistic element, but I think in general, and for this exercise, it's I will definitely go wide. I will make it feel like a very not necessarily low ceiling, but that it's going to be quite a lot wider than it is high, in that sense, and that's something I'm going to focus on because it's just a bit easier to portray effectively portray in our industry with these kind of aspect ratios, since everything goes widescreen, even video games. So if we create something that's very thin and high, it's going to be difficult to show that space in its entirety without actually involving camera moves or any such thing. So that is what I wanted to say about cinematography. In terms of the materials, we're going to stick with the concrete and probably going to use a fair amount of reflection just to conjure up some interest. That'll be it, I think, in terms of the initial kind of thinking process of what I have in mind. So we'll jump into Blender and we'll start blocking out some things and see where this takes us. For the first exercise, choose a general topic that you want to do. Maybe also decide if you want to go sci-fi or realistic, depending on what you feel like. Collect and organize your reference, and you can collect it again from the internet, from books you have. You can organize it in PureRef, in Photoshop, any other app of your choice, whatever you want to use, as long as it allows you to kind of group your images in certain topics like mood and materials and feel and whatever you want. It doesn't matter so much what kind of categories you choose. It's more like that you think strategically about the images you select, and you know why and for what purpose you want to use them. As a last point, analyze the reference, right? Really think about it and identify key elements that you want to transplant into your design. And the clearer an idea of what you have in the beginning, I think the stronger your designs will turn out in the end. I mean, I'm not talking about that you have to slavishly stick to what you set out in the beginning, but I think if you have a good idea of what you want, then it's going to make the final end result a lot stronger. So here we are in Blender. I'm using 2.92, but you can use whatever you want. There's nothing special in here that I'm using that is particular to this version or any other version, so you can use whatever. All the functions I'm going to use are going to be very basic. So as usual, I keep on talking about this like a broken record. We do not start any scene without having a scale model in our viewport, in our scene here. It doesn't matter if whatever you use, as long as it's human size, to give all our designs scale, reference, a point of reference, and make sure we're designing for that particular person. If you want to use a 3-meter tall alien, then by all means put that in there. But you still need a reference point so that everybody can understand it. So if you use a 3-meter tall alien, and make sure you have a human size still there so we can see everything in proportion. With that being said, let me get out of the camera view. There's nothing special, no plugins or anything. I'm just using standard Blender. So we have a ground plane here. We have human 2-meter standard cube. And we can get started. So on the other screen, I have my reference. You should always look at that. You should always have it handy, whether you put it here in a little whether you choose the image viewer panel here and drop the image in here. So if you have one screen, or if you use a separate screen and you have all your images on there, doesn't matter, as long as you have it with you at all times, and you can always refer back to it, because there's no design without reference. And so we're going to start our modeling here. So I'm not 100% sure yet how I'm going to do it. If we're going to have like one story or two stories. A couple of things I want to do definitely is to have this interesting light coming in through the ceiling, through some kind of ceiling opening, which gives us cool shadows. So I need some kind of structure that the light can go through. I also want to have like a spiral staircase that leads us up to a different level, and some sort of abstract funkiness in the background to just give us a bit of so I don't want to necessarily like model the entire exterior and everything. I just want to have some interesting backdrop. As to the function of what I'm designing, I want to probably do a maybe like a museum or something, or some kind of interesting conceptual space, without having to do too many different kind of like pieces of furniture and functional assets or anything. That's maybe something for another lesson. I just want to make sure that we focus on the architecture, the lighting, the scale, proportions, all that good stuff, and not get dragged down by or shorten the runtime by having to add lots of other things. So let's see. I probably want to get rid of this cube because I don't need it right now. I have like I want to probably add a as a reference point. I add a cylinder. I'm gonna get rid of that later, but I just want to have it kind of as a guide, because I'm going to add a cube and kind of make that a bit thinner. I'm just gonna eyeball this. I want to add this here. So this will be kind of like a middle column kind of piece, like a central structural part, but that nevertheless should look quite nice. So I'm switching into edit mode with tab, and then need my gizmo. Just like one of the references I want to have this probably get bigger on the top. Add a little bit of flair to it, just a little bit something so it doesn't look so straight. And then what I'm going to do right away is I want to add actually, let me do this first. We'll have this. We reset rotation and scale. We go to the modifier. We go to array. I want to have an array. Maybe let's make it 50. I need a good amount. And then I want to have not relative offset, but I want to have an object offset. And for that, usually I use an empty. So we use the plane axis. Place it somewhat in the middle. I'll pick that here. You can pick it out of the outliner here, or you can pick it from the viewport, whatever is easier. And now I need to select that empty and play around. It's basically a radial array. But for the lack of a function here, I kind of do it manually. And what we need to do then is we can rotate it so you can see we can, but it's not rotated the right way, so we need to do something about that. So what I want to do is now I can move it around. I hold shift and click on the blue arrow, and then I can move it around because I want to have it rotated like this. It's probably best to look at it from the top. You can see with these two I can kind of influence the radius and move it. So I mean, I could make it very precise with numbers and everything, but I usually just roughly eyeball it. Maybe that's not the nicest thing to do when it comes to precise architecture, but it is fine for the most part. So I have a little gap here. Probably need one more, and now it doesn't quite match anymore. So I want to make sure that this makes sense. So I probably need to just move I just need to move this guy so it looks nice. So we're almost there. Okay, and now I have this nice looking cylinder thing. And now, of course, I wanna make sure I have little details here. Like, I don't want to have it directly in the ground. I want to have it slightly lifted off, so that it just looks nice. It makes sense that this stuff is not bolted to the ground directly. I want to make sure that we understand there's some kind of structure below it, because this thing can't just hold by itself and magically like float in the air. There needs to be some kind of structure below it, under it. I mean, that makes it that holds it in place, and I need to make sure I have that. So right now what we can do is, I mean, this looks nice. I can use this as maybe like a column and repeat it throughout the space if I feel like doing that, depending on what I want to do. I kind of want to use this as a central piece, and maybe have some furniture grouped around it. Maybe it's like an entry area, or like a lounge area for the guests to arrive in the museum, and then maybe the galleries are upstairs, and I can get to them through the spiral staircase I'm going to build. I can also, so I want to make it more fanciful, because I mean, as you can imagine here, like, I have this thing here now. Let me copy it and quickly build a ceiling out of it. So if I get rid of these and select this stuff, I can create myself an opening. So this will be my ceiling, and I will Alt-E, extrude faces along normals, make this kind of ceiling for myself. So it feels maybe a bit high. There's a common thing that I see in a lot of concepts, is that everything is made huge, and while that's fun and interesting, it's not always the best way to do things. Not everything needs to be huge in order to communicate what it needs to communicate. And a lot of times, especially if you work on a movie, they want to build a set out of it, especially for interior architecture. And if you make everything huge all the time, and in case your design only works if it's 500 meters tall, then that's great, but you also need to be able to design something that can actually be built in a soundstage. And mostly these are not like insanely big. So it's a good practice to learn how to build something, also because of budgetary concerns. So if you want to, if you can think about creating something for I don't know, $10,000 or for $100,000 or for $1 million, and understand what goes into making a set at different price points, I think that's a very valuable skill to have. So going back to this concrete example, I have a light source in here. I want to get rid of that. I want to make a new one. I want to make it a sun. So in order to test how lighting is going to affect our space and how we can play with the lighting and improve our design together in conjunction with the light, we can just make kind of like a test setup. So I can switch to EV just to see it in real time. Turn on lighting. I mean, oh my god, the background is gray. That's beautiful. Let's make it blue. And for some reason everything's crazy right now. So we don't have any materials. I'll just use any generic material. So I can just see what's going on. So I have my light here. Maybe make it a bit stronger so I can recognize it as a sunlight. And now we can kind of play around with it and see how lighting can influence our scene here. We can turn on all the fancy stuff for Eevee, all the screen space reflections, the nice shadows, soft shadows and everything, whatever you want. And then it's looking a lot better. So now we can play around with it a bit and can see how it would influence our design. So of course at this point it's just like a skylight coming in here, and that's not particularly amazing. So we need to kind of find a way to interrupt the sunbeam and make something interesting with it. So if we create like something like this, and then now we have at least something not crazy amazing, but we're creating something more interesting here. And if we like this, we can like soften it here a bit. Or we can also make this a bit thicker if you want. Shade it smooth, set the normals to auto smooth. As usual, nothing too fancy here. So let's see how this can help our space. So we have something like this now. Maybe I want to make it a bit flatter and a bit wider. Again, doing what I told you before about the cinematic stuff, make it flatter and wider rather than high. So that looks quite okay. So we have something here that can kind of serve as a starting point, and then we can always play around with this one here, give it some slight details, but nothing crazy here. Can also just give it a little bit of structure to feel like, okay, this is like mainly around the idea of manufacturing something, that we kind of imagine how these things are put together, and that these pieces needs to be connected somehow. They're cast in concrete, not just adding random details everywhere, but having an idea of where and why this kind of stuff would exist. So here we now getting a nice kind of shadow that we can art direct, and that gives focus and attention to certain parts and highlights certain nice aspects of our designs. You want to have contact shadows as well. So now that looks a whole lot better. So now I'm thinking, of course, if we want to add a staircase, then we need to cut a hole into this somewhere so that we can actually get to the second story. Again, let's not make the space like insanely large. we need to have this staircase going up here, and then see where that brings us. So maybe we want to put like so if you imagine we have another person here, let's focus on her. If we have another person here, and she's maybe not on the phone, maybe she's actually looking at an artwork. So, and we create kind of a pedestal for an artwork here. And put something on there. I mean, it kind of gives like it gives a bit of the vibe of like I think it was in Prometheus, where they have the statue of David on here in this big open space. Or was it Alien Covenant? You can also use this as the inverse down here, kind of as a bottom piece. So we have something that this stands on. Makes it look more realistic. Okay, so we have something here, and we kind of get a glimpse of what's up here. So we can put something on. Maybe there's a lot of cool scans out there, like scans from actual art pieces that are from the Louvre or whatever. There's a lot of free stuff, maybe also on Sketchfab, where you can find that, where you can just put something here, add a nice material, and it's gonna get the point across pretty well. So we can look into that later. We need another ceiling here probably, and I'll copy this one, make it a separate piece, reset the origin to geometry, and I want to add another ceiling on top of here because I don't want this to be an outdoor space, so I can actually have two different kinds of interiors to show you. So let's make this similar, belonging to the same family but slightly different. So I should make all of these smooth and auto smooth. Come here. So I wanted to maybe let's see, this other piece, what I saw before, was quite interesting from the reference, so let's kind of try to emulate that. A bit of a cut here, and now we have like multiple levels of. So now that we're here, let's have a look. So now that we actually constricted the opening here a bit, we see that not that much light is filtering down anymore. I mean, we can change that, of course, by kind of making the opening a bit bigger, kind of making the sky a bit bigger as well. so that we just have more opportunities for the light to go through. Otherwise, we're only really going to see the sun coming through when it's really around noon time, right, like this. But at least now it's going to give us some more opportunities to play around with the light position. So we just have more options. So, oh, she's floating in the air. It doesn't really matter right now, but better fix that. So let's have a look at the staircase. So what I usually would do is that we'll add a cube. Give it our standard material. I probably wanted to, we need to kind of, okay, we can just let it start here. So maybe around here, make this a bit bigger. Make this a bit bigger, so okay. How wide? Maybe like this. So that's why it's helpful to always have this person here, so we can kind of get an idea how wide our staircase should be. So what I'm going to do now is use the screw modifier. Screw. Of course, it doesn't look like anything right now. I want to use my empty and make another copy, because I need to change it. And if I change my first empty, which is the reference point for this guy, it's going to mess everything up. So I'll just make a copy of it. For this one, I want to have now an axis object, and for that I use this guy. Reset position and scale, and you see we have this thing revolving around here. Now I have a few options, of course. I can change how many iterations I want. So if I want to have it rotate 7 times around the axis point, I can put 7, but I just need 1. But I do need to have this go up. So and now you can see we have this piece here, which is great. Let me change that again. So it looks a bit choppy right now, so I usually want to change the revolutions here. There are the steps, which will make it a lot smoother. So now you can see it's a bit more, it's more round. It feels more round. So later on I need to cut a hole in here, of course. And of course we need to make this look like stairs properly, right? So we can, I probably want to put the person next to here, because I want it to look like and be the right scale for stairs. So if I plan maybe this much for railing, take these guys, extrude them up, right? They should be just high enough for a regular kind of railing, so she just doesn't fall to her death when she walks up our staircase here. So if I look at this now, well, that looks already quite good. Probably make this flush with the bottom here. Okay. So if I imagine she's like, okay, go up here. Maybe it's still a bit low. Make it a bit higher. Also probably a bit thicker. That's gonna look nicer, because then we can also make it a bit more fanciful. So let's see. Let's make it look a little bit more interesting. Within our kind of concrete design language. That's okay. Let me see. Maybe I need to do this step before. Yeah, okay, let's make it like this. So I can make a proper cut here. Let's move this guy up a little bit. So maybe something like this, maybe. And now we can add our... So now we have something like this. If we turn on our screw again, it kind of disappears, but let's see what happens if we... What happens if we add a subdivision modifier here to make it all just a little bit smoother? So we're kind of getting something here. There's a hint of a gap here, which is good. So I think this looks pretty okay. Let's see if we have to worry about these open holes that were created, or if we don't have to worry about them. But now it's nice and round. We need to now consider that the space this needs to open. So we need to let's create a cutout here. So let's see where this one goes here, this goes here, and then we can actually, we don't need to cut out the entire thing, of course. Like here we don't need, we can get rid of all of these, but at some point it needs to open. So usually when they start bumping their heads on the ceiling, that's not good. So maybe we can create this and then delete this, and then we need to kind of get an idea of, we can probably just make the same two cuts and then guesstimate once we cut this out. Maybe we can do it like this, and then I don't care too much about the topology, to be honest. We can create something regardless. So we see this one here, and if we kind of extend this a bit, we can kind of cover this up, and then if we make this a bit smaller, we have this covered, and then we just actually we just need to get rid of this, and if we extend this upwards, we are essentially done with this here. And I mean, okay, of course it's all like full of holes or whatever, but I mean, in the end it creates these nice breakups. And of course this is terrible here. What are we doing? Right, so we need to actually increase the height, and there we go. So we just want to make it flush with this version here. That was a miscalculation from my side, so I think she is going to bump her head here. Good to know, but maybe we can... Oh, this has become a gap here. That's not good. So, well, that's interesting though. This creates a nice, interesting structure that was not intended at all, but let's see what we can do with this one. So if we, let's make an inset here, tiny inset with I, and then extend it down. That kind of should, again, it gives us these like cut lines that are at the right point, but that were not at all intended. So, and this gives us kind of an interesting pattern on the ceiling that we didn't think about before. And of course, okay. That is not what I wanted, but we can save that easily by just duplicating it. And perfect. I don't know if this is too low. Let's see, can I just pull this up, or is this going to break everything? This is of course going to do this. The only way to find out really is take a character and put him on the ground here. And if she, we actually need to put her here. If she bumps her head, or if it looks too close, then we need to do something about it. And it is definitely too close. So what we can do is, maybe we need to actually get rid of something here. What happens if I move this up? That's not going to be good. What happens if I get rid of this? Yeah, that looks good actually. So now we can actually fix it. So maybe do it a bit like this. So there's a bit of a slope. Okay. And now I think everybody has enough headroom. So that's why it's always key to have these people there, so you don't run into these kind of problems while building the space out, because somebody is bound to notice it at the end of the day. So this place is getting a bit of structure here, so that's good. So you can kind of see, okay, we're creating kind of a structure here, a flow. Okay, maybe I want this to be a bit thicker. Let's see how this looks. Let's turn off this one. Let's make this a bit thicker, so this structure doesn't look so flimsy. You can also add some to the bottom here to make it look a bit more like it has like an underlying structure, like something that is under the concrete, that the concrete has been poured over. So now it has a bit more heft. That's good. So we have our little staircase, we have our ceiling window. Maybe it needs to be a bit bigger, a bit wider, so that once we switch to our camera and have a look around, we can kind of see what we can do with our camera. Maybe I want to use like a more standard lens. Like, it's always good to see how your space looks like in a 35, just like absolute standard lens, or in a 50, and then you kind of see how this how this wide, like a space that's wider than high is really nice for framing this in camera in a cinema scope format, so you can create really nice angles here. That's already looking pretty good, and can kind of direct our eyes. So as a next step, maybe want to look at bringing like thinking about what we can do with the space to make it a bit more interesting. Maybe I want to bring in a statue and then see if we can design something around that statue and how it will feel like in this space. So let's do that. So I brought this guy in here now. And I think it's a statue scan from Benjamin Bardot, who scanned a lot of these from, I think, the Louvre. And they're really, some of them are really great quality, really high resolution. And I mean, they're good enough for our concept workflow. And you can use anything. I mean, it doesn't really matter, whatever. It can be something modern, it can be something strange, abstract, alien, whatever you want, right? It doesn't really matter. This is just for illustration purposes here. So, I mean, this in itself is very like nice and simple, and we can leave this by itself, but we can also try to just do a little bit more with it. One of the things maybe we can try to do is do something more with the ceiling, and I will try, I mean, I'm just going to use some of the inspiration from the reference I had using this piece here. Maybe I should get out of the camera view. Kind of doing this. There were a couple of like these kind of like holes in the ceiling, or cutouts, booleans, and we'll try to emulate these rounded. So now we want to try to cut these out, but we also of course need to do another rotational array, another radial array here. Maybe not with, maybe if we have 24, how does that look? We do the same as before. We use the object offset with the newly copied second empty I created, and we need to adjust it again. So we'll move it in position. Need to make sure that it's aligned properly. There's something funky happening here. Maybe I'll move them up so I can actually see what's happening here, so we can group them around the hole properly. So let's select the empty and just move it in position again. We need a few more, it seems, but I think there's, yeah, exactly like this. We need to, maybe there's a better way of doing this, but this is fine for now. I think this should be just okay. Okay, let's see. Let's move these guys down again. And then we can create our Boolean. So kind of like this. Select this guy. Don't forget to save before any kind of crazy Boolean operations. Take this, and then we can hide this, and then we kind of have our Boolean here. So that's not bad. That is not bad at all. Doesn't have to be anything crazy detailed or otherwise fantastically complicated. Sometimes the simpler option is a good one. So I really like that the light is coming through here and hitting this guy. But let's think about it and take it a step even further. So let's try. I want to add like a sphere. Maybe subdivided once, and then I only want part of it. So I cut out maybe this part. And maybe this part. And then I only want every second. Is there a way to... There's probably a way to do it automatically, but before I found that, I'll rather do it this way. You can let me know which is exactly the button to press for this. But basically, while I'm doing this, I can tell you why. So I basically want to only have every second one. The idea being that I want this to be some kind of translucent material. I want this to kind of be in glass so that it will reflect around this guy. So let me show you what I had in mind. And of course I tried this before, so I know what I'm doing. I just want to kind of bring you through the thought process of doing this. So let's put this in the middle. Kind of like this. And then I'm not going to see the connection point between the top of this and the ceiling. But kind of like this. And then I probably want to, let's see if I want to like solidify this. Just making it thicker, basically. So I have it like this, and then maybe we want to, so it's not everywhere the same, we kind of delete randomly some of these guys. So we're making them a bit uneven, so to speak. So if we delete all of these, you can see we're kind of getting an interesting pattern. And then what we can also do is we'll take the whole bunch, duplicate it and scale it down, and then re-rotate it. And then we do the same again, duplicate, hit S, scale it down, rotate it. Let's see. Maybe we need to take this bunch and move it down a bit. Let's see. That's something quite interesting. So now if we actually give this a glass shader, so I think at this point we need to switch into cycles to have this look properly. And let's do this, because I think the refractions and reflections are going to be a bit tricky. So it's already looking a lot more realistic in cycles. But let's give this material, and we use our mix of a glass shader with a transparent one. and something is happening there, so that's good. But let's see how we can get this a bit better. Or we can actually, we can also make a different kind of mix. So if I want to create something interesting, let's make it really reflective and dark in color. There's something interesting happening here. So we're getting, this kind of breaks up a little bit. And we're seeing this guy, or should see him a little bit refracted through this lens here, and then maybe we want to bring in some kind of material that can help us reflect this even more. So let me see if you can play around with this. This one is better. So if we actually take the solidify away, then we're kind of getting a crazier effect here. Let's see if we do like a bit of a subdivision. Or if we just simply say smooth. Yeah, okay, that already does the effect that I want. So now we're getting an interesting reflection of this guy. Sometimes crazier, sometimes less. So you want to kind of move around and see where this guy doesn't get too destroyed. And once we add, I think, a bit of a different kind of roughness into here, maybe throw a material or something, then it's going to get more interesting. And also maybe an HDRI, maybe. We'll play around with it and see what comes out of it. But this is quite interesting. There's something going on here. Let's see what happens down there, if we still get any light. Yeah, so now we're actually getting the additional reflections of these glass pieces on the ground, which makes it look really interesting. Now we're getting quite an interesting shadow. Maybe we can also turn this into the glass material. So now we're really getting really interesting reflections inside here. And then once we actually start making this material more reflective, of course we're going to put material like a concrete material on here, but now that we're getting a lot more reflections and a lot more interesting stuff going all at the same time, this space is quickly becoming quite interesting. Maybe the reflection here is a bit too harsh, so maybe we need to get glimpses. Maybe we need to have gaps, like through which we can still see the figure undistorted. So like you see here that the head is still at the right position because we're looking through the glass, but all the other parts are kind of distorted. So you need to walk around the entire exhibit to see the statue behind it, which could be like an interesting experience. So you can add like a different dimension of interest behind this kind of stuff. So here it becomes really interesting. cool to and interactive to look at this thing. And then you can think about making an animation where like the camera rotates around, and then you get these different reflections and images of this experience. So that can be really quite cool, and it's you can simulate it at the height of the character here. So you stay here and then you move around and you can see how this changes. This is really interesting, to me at least. I don't know how you feel about it, but in any case, let's see. So maybe for this one we need, I have a bit of an issue here that these guys can just like fall down here, and we don't want that. We really don't want that. So if we actually switch out of the viewport again and think about making like a railing here, that'd be nice, so nobody gets hurt. Maybe like this, pull it up to the proper height, and then you probably need one here as well. Actually, let's do it like this. I need to see the height again. Okay. Let's make one here as well. Okay. So nobody has to die anymore. Probably want to do it outside here as well, but that should be easier. So we'll just do it like this. Move it up. Okay. And I don't know, I mean, this space could lead to somewhere else. Excuse me. This space could lead to somewhere else, right? But that's not our concern right now. Maybe there's only this one exhibit, and you can like also walk around here and see what's outside. Maybe there's more statues here on these spaces, and you can go crazy and imagine whatever the space could look like. But for now, for us, we wanna focus kind of in this area. So let's see. So we kind of have the downstairs space, we have the upstairs space, and maybe we want to take a look at before we get into the materials and focusing a bit more on the lighting and the HDRI and whatever we're going to use. Let's have a look at maybe what we can do with the outside here. Because right now we don't have anything at all created on the outside here. It's just empty. And I think we do need something. Because otherwise we're just gonna look into the big old nothingness, or we have to put like photos in or whatever. But let's see if we can create something in 3D that kind of takes makes it easier for us to just have something there that is interesting, that we kind of get maybe happy accidents out of it, and it's nevertheless interesting to look at. So let's do that. So you can create these kind of abstract stuff that is that we want to put on the outside here in a variety of ways, and I just like to take the absolute simplest way. So I'm just going to use these things I made here. I copy them up here, and then I want to bring a bit of randomness into it. So I'll select just a few points here and there, wherever. I'll make sure I have the proportional editing enabled, and then I can just rotate them around, and I can, with a scroll wheel, change the sphere of influence. you can see how we're getting already really funky patterns. And then maybe I select just the middle part here and really bring it really far outside here. So you can see how we're getting this crazy shape already. So, and then I can enable the solidify again, maybe make it even more. Probably want to do that, and then add the subdivision. I added before as well, and even more. Right, and then we can bring this really to the outside. And then we can always like take this whole thing and duplicate it, make it bigger, rotate it. And then see what we get. So once we actually look through the camera again, we see that all this crazy stuff is happening here. So if you push this further back, it just becomes background noise. It looks crazy right now, but it's not going to be actual, like, we're not going to consider it actual geometry or anything. It's going to be just stuff in the background. And if we make it also maybe in the glass material, which it already is, then it might actually look pretty interesting. So we haven't even applied any HDRI yet, or any materials or anything, or worked really on this, which will be the next step. But you can already see that it creates a nice parallax. There is something going on. And we create, like, you see all these happy accidents. You see all this crazy stuff here in the background that we could have never built. Like, this is really interesting to me. And we can use this stuff immediately. We can also make another copy of that. Oh, I should have made it a separate thing. And then you can take it further. Maybe we take the subdivision out. And I don't know, what else can we do with it? Some crazy other modifier which we haven't thought about. I wonder what happens if you use the screw on this one in a different direction. Maybe not completely. I mean, this is just crazy. This is really interesting. If you take this now, for example, I mean, there's something quite interesting that you can never really model. Maybe this is not part of what we need here because it's maybe a bit too... But if you look at this, I mean, this could be another interesting backdrop. So maybe if you don't want to have the screw, maybe you want to have the... There's another pretty cool modifier which we can use, maybe... I forgot what was warp. Hook? No. You can find ways to like bend and distort all these things. Simple, like this is pretty cool. This is already some crazy shit. Like, this is very, you might not believe it, but this is very useful. So these are like rotating like this. That's pretty cool. So you can do that, and then we do our subdivision again. Maybe like a smooth modifier, just to let it run a couple of times to thin it out. And now you have, looks almost like a woven basket kind of thing. But in case this is too wild for you and too messy, we can use this one, make it a bit smaller, to have something more orderly. And oh, I don't want to delete that, it's beautiful. So if we have that one here, look through our camera, and that's pretty interesting. That is really interesting. It's gonna look beautiful once we put like a glass material on it. Maybe you want to turn it around. That'll make more sense. So once we have that here, let's look through. We can play with the thickness. There's a lot of pretty things going on here, I think. So I think in terms of modeling, I mean, there's really not much else to do. I mean, there's things to fine tune, things to fix, but in terms of creating a space, creating an interesting space and everything, I think this is pretty close to what I want. The next step will really be going in with materials and maybe adding some, we'll definitely be adding some details in terms of like, I think I want to put in a bit of furniture. But in terms of like building out things, I think we're almost there, I would say. So as a next step, I'll be, I think, looking at some materials and looking at some details and lighting to get this space really, really polished up. For the second exercise, you should start building your design in 3D. And as with every tutorial I show you, please start with a scale figure in your scene. Don't do anything before you have that. Otherwise, you're going to be completely lost and have no idea what you're doing. Design your interior with the experience of somebody walking around in your design. How would they feel and what would they see, and would it be interesting for them to go through it? How would it affect their mood? Is it a very dark space? Do you want them to be scared? Do you want them to be in awe? Do you want them to be do you want them to feel at home? Do you want the space to feel cold or cozy or warm, positive or negative? Like, think about these kind of things. And also think about examples that you have experienced or that you've seen that evoke these kind of feelings in you. And lastly, work with contrasts. And some of this will be done through lighting, some of this will be done through thinking materials, actual geometry, right? So think about light to dark, soft and hard materials, open to enclosed spaces, opaque to transparent materials, natural to man-made. Is something more organic, or is something made out of wood compared to concrete, compared to rectangular forms? So now that we have built our geometry and everything, I wanted to take you a little bit through the material setup, the lights and the details and everything else. that I wanted to put in here. So I actually switched from the model I just showed you that I made with you to the one I prepared before, and it's essentially the same thing. You can see that maybe I made some different modeling choices, but I mean the idea and everything else really is the same. I added some different kind of kit bash pieces I had lying around into it, just to give it a little bit more detail here and there, and you can do that as well if you want. And I mean these random things outside here are looking a bit different because I just made them out of different pieces that I had, but I made it exactly the same way that I just showed you, by kind of distorting and squeezing and changing and playing around with modifiers based on existing geometry. One thing I wanted to mention, and that is a question I get like 10 times a month, is, where do you get your characters? Where do you get your models? Where do you get your textures and HDRIs and everything else? And I'll mention some of them here as I go through them, but you should always check my YouTube channel, because I made a video specifically for that, where I go through all of, not all of them, but at least a few of the resources I usually go to and websites I go to where I purchase my models. And by and large, that still is true to this day, even though I made the video a couple of months or maybe already even a year ago. So as we go through this, I'm going to show you how I set up some of the shaders. I mean, not in crazy detail, because it's I think redundant information at this point, because I still do everything the same way. So I don't want to bore the people who purchased all my previous tutorials with the same kind of information. And I mean, it's just really standard setups. There's nothing crazy complicated in there. So let's have a quick look. So I basically only have one, two, I think 3 materials really. So I have the kind of concrete here. Oh, that not this one. Let me see where it's hiding. Yeah, so here I have a concrete material, and you can see that it's fairly simple. It's a texture I purchased from the Real Displacement Textures web store, and I'm using that for the albedo, for the specular, for the roughness, and for the bump. And scale it around a little bit. I use, as usual, a kind of a box mapping. You can check the setup. It's basically using the box mapping here and getting it into the world coordinates is the same as usual, by using the mapping with the vector transform that transforms the object into world coordinates, and then plugging that everywhere in so I can scale it up and down. There's a couple of inverts to play around with the glossiness, the reflectivity of the textures, and also I desaturated the albedo texture because it was a bit too warm, a bit too a bit too orangey for my taste. The other ones are just this is a really simple gray texture with a reflectivity map, with this map actually attached to it. It's a non-tiling, just random kind of concrete thing texture that gives me nice reflections that are just a bit different from the concrete. I scaled it a little bit. We can forget about that. I don't even use that, and that's all. And then I have the glass, and we'll see in a second how that looks. And the glass is a mixture of like a completely reflective principled shader together with a glass BSDF mixed together. The glass BSDF has a kind of a dirt texture. I think I used this one here as a kind of like just to dirty up the reflectivity to make it look like a bit more like real glass. And I mean, there's so many different ways on how you can do a glass shader. You can just only use the glass. I just tend to use whatever looks best. Not necessarily maybe the most 100% accurate kind of glass shader, but whatever I feel looks good. So we have that in there. If you go up here, you kind of see how that here looks. I mean, it's basically the same thing, the same idea. I added just a couple of different models in there, and these are from 3dscanstore.com. These like photo scan 3D figures that are done incredibly well and are not that heavy. They're, I think, about 100K polys with some 8 or 16K maps, and you can scale them down. You can make them into 2K or 4K if they're just background figures, and that's really it. In terms of the lighting information, I'm just going to show you quick. I mean, there's really nothing here. There's a HDRI in there, and that's it. You can also play around with the sky texture, and maybe like I have a sun in here as well. You can play around with the sky texture and see how it differs, and we can do that in a second as well. And that's really all there is. There's nothing else in there, or well, actually there is, but I'll show you I'll put a furniture in here. And again, you can purchase those things from all the usual websites. They usually come with textures and all sorts of things, just to give this space here a bit of a purpose. I mean, this is maybe like an entrance area, a foyer, or like a lobby, or whatever you want, or a cafe. I usually put these in just to give it better scale, to make it like look a bit more inviting, and then you can, I don't know, place some 3D scan models of people sitting there. That also exists out there. And but it can also be, if it's like, I don't know, if you want to take this into the sci-fi realm, then it can be some kind of, I don't know, a laboratory, whatever. You can turn it into anything, right? But for my purposes here, since I wanted it to be kind of like a museum, we can imagine that, yeah, people arrive here and then they go up into the gallery section. And then maybe if they're down here, they can already kind of like look up here and catch a glimpse of the stuff that we can see from the gallery up in the second story more clearly. But it's kind of interesting how not only allows this structure, the sun, to come through and light up the space below, it also gives us a different kind of experience, which is nice. So once we have a look at the rendered version, which we definitely want to do, I'll show you how I thought about adding these, adding the lighting touches and the materials and everything. So let's load this up. I haven't used the new Cycles X yet, and I heard good things about it, and I'll be trying it out and hopefully be able to show you some stuff for the next month tutorial. I'm still on 2.9.2, and it still takes a while, especially with some of the bigger textures. Again, it's debatable, do you need those? If it really hinders your performance, then maybe it will be better to take some of these incredibly large textures out of your file, because there's usually just maybe it's for all the people I used the standard textures that come with it, instead of kind of scaling them down, which is probably not a good idea. As you can see, it takes quite a while for it to load in. Let's give this a second. Also, for the surrounding random elements that are kind of supposed to be my backdrop and hinting at different abstract structures in the distance, I just applied the same kind of glass material as I did for this kind of like circular orb thing around our statue. And now it takes really forever. So I hope that will go faster once we have loaded the scene in. The scene is not that heavy actually. It's only like 4.1 million triangles. And here we are. So here we can now see that I actually bumped up the power of the HDR quite a lot, because we're dealing with like an interior here, and I really wanted to get the right kind of feeling for the interior. On the outside is probably, it's like to an atomic level brightness, but because we have to kind of compensate for the interior, and if you imagine that if you're used to kind of taking pictures, that if you expose something for an interior, and maybe you have part of an interior on it, and you look out a window, the window will be incredibly blown out in terms of the light. You will not be able to see the exterior and the interior equally well exposed, where you can see everything. And that was kind of the idea here. I'm honestly not a big fan of this kind of HDRI look. Sorry, not HDRI. This like I forgot what the name is. I thought sometimes they call it HDR or whatever, where you kind of have an evenly exposed interior and exterior. That doesn't look very nice to me. For me, like a cinematic look is still all about well-controlled contrast between light and dark, where you choose what to hide, what to show, and use these like older photographic kind of ideas of high contrast and things to an artistic degree, so that you can choose to have some areas hidden or purposefully murky, hiding in the background, and so that you can have some areas that read better. So once we let this clear up a little bit, we can see how the light filters in through here, and then we can always change the sun direction if you want, and play around with that a little bit. I mean, if we go too much in either direction, you will see that we're kind of losing the highlight on the ground. And I mean, it's really nice to have this filter through, and you can imagine how nice it would be to sit actually on here, or at least I would imagine. I mean, once we actually get into a sunset setting, maybe there would be something interesting as well when the light is coming in from the side. That would be looking completely different. Right now we have a little bit of our exterior here blocking the light here. Let me see if we can do anything. This is a 10. If we bump this up a lot more, and the other stuff is blocking it right now. But I mean, you can experiment with, let's say, a sunset kind of look here. I want to match if you can see here, we have the difference between where the HDRI lighting comes from and where my sun kind of comes from, and we want to match those, right? I want to use the sun as kind of like an additional kind of lighting here to bump up the intensity without necessarily affecting the ambient light that comes from the HDRI. And I mean, that's really up to you how you want to do that. It's there's no hard and fast rule, whatever looks best. I like to have this kind of control over it, so that's really up to you. So you see how if you go to the materials here, how we have this kind of blurriness that comes from this kind of like a dirty roughness map, and that kind of gives us a bit of it takes out the crazy refractions, and doesn't distort the view through these glass panels too much. Because if like we saw before, that if it does, then it really creates this like super abstract kind of puzzle, and we can't really tell anymore what we're looking at behind the glass panel. And I still want to, I mean, it's nice to have these refractions in here and to get this kind of like chopped off effect, but if it's too much, then you can't really recognize anymore what's going on, and then it destroys the effect, I think. So we need to, in a sense, tone it down a little bit. And we can also see the exterior here in the background has these really nice like swirly nature. And God knows what's outside, but I mean, if you look at some interesting museums around the world, I mean, they are as much a piece of art in themselves, right? So I mean, if you talk like about modern art museums and that kind of stuff, and that kind of maybe pushes this design that we have here more into like the near future science fiction realm, rather than it being strictly a contemporary design. And again, that's something that you can explore by yourself. So I'll get into the camera settings, the camera angles in a second, but you can already see that once we kind of get into a camera angle that simulates the point of view of our character, and which is something that is absolutely crucial, that we should always explore and make sure that it looks cool, then you can kind of see how this entire not only the sculpture is an artwork, but the architecture itself becomes again something considered, and something that maybe gives a different spin on the sculpture, or becomes an artwork in itself with a different kind of meaning. So if you go below here, right, so it's still, we could probably add pieces of artificial lighting, strip lighting in the floor, to make this space read better, right? So I chose, or I actually thought about it for some time, to actually add lighting inside this cube here, and decided against it for now, because I kind of really like the natural light coming through here and giving this really dramatic look to the space. And we have ambient light coming in through the sides, and if you add too many lights in here, then we kind of, I think, lose the contrast between this interesting exterior and the interior. The same glass, I just applied the same glass everywhere, because I thought this column here in the middle would be too boring if it was just concrete. I don't know if glass makes that much sense, but it becomes really, really nice, and these reflections and everything really add to making an interesting piece. And then you have the warm tones from the wood table kind of reflecting off the glass as well, which again is just a nice free bonus kind of element in there. And her red handbag also is just a nice accent. You have people kind of in the background, only silhouetted, and if you remember some of the reference I had, where we had like highlights of the sun coming in and highlighting certain people, certain areas of the picture, and a lot of the other kind of people in the background were only silhouetted against a brighter background, or somewhere at the edge of the frame. And that's kind of what we did here as well. And that kind of goes full circle with the reference that we had. So, I mean, these are really the materials. There's really nothing else in there that I've used. You can kind of see it repeats here in the background, so we want to kind of maybe hide that a little bit. Here's some of the kit bashing that I squeezed in. That just gives me like a nice breakup of these of the ground floor. So if we look at, let's have a look at the camera angles to see how we can really bring out some of this nice architecture in a very cinematic way. So of course I chose already the camera angles. So we have two structures to this design really. We have the upper gallery and we have the lower lobby. And here, of course, it's the like showcasing the glass, the sculpture, the kind of, I don't know, dialogue, if you want, between the spectator and the artwork, and how they relate to each other. So, like, how would it be if somebody looks at this artwork, and how would that make them feel? How would that make you feel when you can imagine, like, I don't know, the camera is like panning through here or rotating around the object. The refractions kind of play with the light, and you have, I purposely chose a reflective floor here just to get more interest into the surrounding area. So I didn't put it into the ceiling. Maybe we could have done that as well, but I kind of wanted to have the focus of this image be on the spectator and the artwork. If we kind of go through the camera angles, so I chose 6 camera angles. If you go through here, but I turned this off so it's not as distracting. So again, point of view of a person, and that's something that you always need to consider. That's very, very crucial. Even like presenting any kind of design, any kind of interior, any kind of exterior, any kind of environment, always make an angle that gives us an idea of what would it be like for a human to stand there and look at your design, and ideally out of a normal kind of lens, maybe a 35 or 50 millimeter, because that's kind of emulating a normal person's field of view. If you go extremely long lens or extremely wide angle, then that's fine. That becomes more of an artistic interpretation, and that can be great as well. But I think if you have the ability to present multiple angles, if you build everything in 3D, if you're able to render out a lot of different views, then make that always one of the options, I think. And your AD, PD or whatever will really appreciate that if you have an understanding of well, what it means to build a set, what it means to present a set, design and architecture, something from a point of view of a regular 6-foot human. So we have that. We can kind of appreciate the texture here. I kind of have the light and dark from the kind of pedestal here with what is below, and so we can appreciate some of the architecture here. If we go to this one, load a second. So here's kind of like an exterior shot. That was more of an accident I found, because I didn't really plan on showing, I don't know if you would consider this an exterior or, I don't know, an in-between space. But I thought it was interesting how these light shafts came down. So this was not, again, this was not something I was like, okay, I want to do a shot like this. It was just me circling around with the camera and going like, oh, hey, I didn't notice that these light streaks would come in here. So it gives us kind of a more shot at distance to see how this would look like from maybe somebody in a adjacent kind of gallery, or somebody in the building next door, or maybe even from looking from the outside in, and how that would look. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and so I kept it. And now we're moving downstairs to have a look at that room. So here again, it's the same I kind of mentioned before, having that nice contrast between the natural light filtering in, the abstract background to the more hard surface interior with the concrete and the glass and the almost like organic forms outside. the highlight on a certain aspect of our image, the silhouetting, and further interest in the corners of the image. We have here another person as well to show that we can kind of go up here. I think it's nice to put these people here that actually are using the space that you designed, and show them how, or show the viewer, the person who looks at your image, to tell them with these elements of how you would imagine this to be. I mean, if this person wasn't here, then maybe there would be a question mark about what this ramp is. Is it a staircase? Is it a ramp? Is it something else? Is it a I don't know, an element that is like a supporting element? Who knows, right? So we have this space here, and again, I took out the lighting, the artificial lighting, on purpose to create this stronger contrast. Of course, then probably the PD would come back and it's like, hey, this is all way too dark. Can you put some lights here? Like, I can't even tell what's going on here. But that, of course, that is a fair request. Going into this image, kind of more on the ground, maybe feeling like, oh, somebody is sitting here, and again, rotating around the camera, playing around with it, and then creating these pockets of light and dark, creating silhouettes, creating opportunities for these contrasts to play in and to showcase what you've built. So here again, the sunlight highlights certain aspects of it while hiding others, right? So we can see that there's a chair here. Here it's light on dark, but over here it's dark on light. And here also, again, silhouettes of other people, of other points of interests, that can kind of like push and elevate your design. So, I mean, the thing is, it's incredibly hard to plan all of this. It's incredibly hard to just build, like, it's not like I come up with all these image ideas before I do this. I have my reference board that you saw, I have the mood, I have the ideas that I kind of want to do, but of course to do different images that capture all of these emotions and all of these beats I want to hit is not something that I think, or something not I can plan from the beginning. I don't sketch these out and was like, okay, I'll do this, this, and this. I think something happens here where once you have designed a space that works relatively well, and once you have these elements in position that kind of deals with, okay, I have an interesting space, I have this, and this ramp goes up, and I have the exterior, and you have all these things in place, then it's about finding these compositions, not by accident, but it's not a complete accident, but it's not complete intention either. So I think that's something that comes with doing this a lot of times, and knowing which elements you have to have done, which steps you have to go through in order to be able to capture these things with relative ease. And then it's also about noticing that, okay, hey, this has a lot of potential. Like, I just need to, like, okay, let's move this. Like, I have the composition kind of there, but then I need to kind of improve it a little bit. It's like, okay, I need to move the sun maybe 1 or 2 degrees further here. I have to put a person there. I have to, like, rotate the exterior thing just slightly, so that you get rid of, like, tangents, you get rid of awkward spaces, and that you create these pockets of light and dark that look effortless, but of course are kind of like a hybrid between intention and I don't know, what do you want to call it? Happy accident, luck, serendipity, whatever. Let's go to the last image here, and I mean, you can do more and more and more, but it's kind of, once you have, I think, like a handful of killer images that really showcase your design well, I I usually like to just go in and really try to find some more unusual things. Again, once you have the standard kind of look, like with a 35 or 50 millimeter lens that gives you kind of the normal experience of a human going through, then let's try to artistically push it a little bit, go wider, go longer in terms of the lens, put the camera in odd places, try abstract compositions that are more artistically driven rather than something where you would say like, okay, this is the normal experience that you would have. Work with negative spaces like I have here, where you kind of create this negative space where this person stands and looks at this sculpture, right? And I added a little bit of, if you go to camera settings, I added a depth of field so that she's in focus, but the glass elements closer to us are becoming blurred out, and so does the background. Again, it was too distracting in front to have everything really in focus in terms of the sculpture. I wanted to be like, even though the size and everything, the contrast is in favor of the sculpture here. I wanted to direct focus also on her, and well, you can direct focus by actually focusing the camera, of course. And this foreground becomes this glass half cube sphere thing. Sorry, not cube, sphere, becomes more like of an abstract landscape where you can kind of lose yourself in and wonder what it is about. So these are all the shots I did. And the only other thing I did to play, and where I wanted to play around with, is actually add two things actually. So if you look at this one, I added a cube with a volume material to get a bit more distance in here, and it worked quite well. It's really light, so you can see the density is at 0.01, but I also added the emission to 0.003 and a slightly bluish emission color, and that helps it to just like, because if you add a volume, everything will become really dark. If you add this emission in here on a really, really low degree, it kind of it brightens up the space a little bit. Maybe it's less accurate or whatever, but it gives a desired effect where we get these like God rays and stuff in here, which I really like. The only other thing I did is to, here you can see it really how this pushes down. The only other thing I did is for these shots in the lower story, I added an area light that kind of is supposed to give, or it's in here. It's basically in between these two stories and just shining down. So it's supposed to emulate the sunlight and just give it a bit more push without really changing the fundamental kind of exposure and everything of this. So it gives it a bit more definition, and maybe it's kind of like without adding the artificial lights, I kind of try to enhance the natural kind of light filtering down. And so you see how we get these God rays here, which is really nice, and again it adds to the atmosphere, I think. And that's really all I did. So you can see that in this case I actually didn't really paint over much if you compare it to the final images, and that's why there's really no need to go to explain anything about Photoshop. The way I rendered these out in the end is 3840 by 1600 with the adaptive sampling on. I render 1000 samples and denoised the render with optics. And that gives me a really clean, nice image. I mean, you can then choose in the end if you want to leave the noise from the noisy image in there And for these interiors, there will always be a lot more noise unless you render it out with a lot of samples. And then optics does a very good job of cleaning the image up. And then, I mean, you can choose in the end if you want to have a cleaner image or if you want to have a noisier image that can add a bit of life into it. I actually did use the clean image and then brought it into Photoshop to add like a little bit of kind of film grain back into it. And that gives you more control in the end. I mean, if you leave the grain in, then it's kind of in the image, and you don't have maybe as many choices to fix things. And so I'll usually use the clean image and add the film grain at a later point, so I have more control over it. But yeah, that's I think all I have for this series. I hope you really enjoyed the series, and we will continue architectural ideas in the next one as well, and we'll see where that brings us. I still want to touch on more large-scale exteriors, something more futuristic, especially also abstract architecture, organic alien worlds. How do you approach that? How do you design that? How do you come up with crazy, funky ideas that are still grounded in a human experience, so to speak? So please look forward to those in the coming month. And again, thank you so much for the support, and have a good time. For the last exercise, I would recommend that as you come into the final polishing of your design, that you show and explain with character placement or character movement and what they do on how someone would experience your design. Explain, like, I don't know, if you have a staircase that looks quite interesting, like place people on there so you see that that the audience can see that people are supposed to use it as an, I don't know, elevator, escalator, staircase, ramp, whatever. Have people, I don't know, sit down on interesting pieces of furniture that you maybe even designed, or make it clear wherever you put the characters that, I don't know, you're supposed to look in this direction, or you're supposed to do this. Instead of having to explain that in words to somebody through a description or whatever, just make sure you show that in the visuals. You can add purpose and even refinement through human scale objects, right? So that can be, for example, furniture, that can be railings, that can be even posters or stickers or an exit sign or whatever, right? So many ideas of how you can add a human touch through these kind of elements that humans are supposed to use. I would recommend for the materials, as usual, make realistic materials. I've seen online so many times that an interesting design in 3D is falling apart because the material is just, I look at it and I just don't understand what this material is supposed to be. Make it, again, make it feel realistic, not too complicated, not too crazy, but just like you look at it, you know exactly what it is. And I think part of that is always to make it tangible, to make it in a way that you can imagine how it would feel to the touch. Again, work with contrasts in terms of the materials and lighting ideas. Like I mentioned before, materials can be, contrast in materials can be natural to man-made, transparent to opaque, hard to light, hard to soft. Lighting ideas the same, right? Play with shadow, play with lighting, and so forth.